Do you think Prince Harry should be on that list, on that protected list?
Yes. So there you go, that's cutting straight to the chase. And I'm not supposed to talk about these things. They did it because they didn't think he would leave. There are plenty of people on the list who don't have a threat and risk profile that would automatically guarantee them armed protection. He was certainly one that did.
I've just had an interesting chat with Neil Basu, Britain's former head of counterterrorism. We were discussing Prince Harry's security issues, the decision not to give him security. Neil Basu used to sit on RAVEC, which is the Royal and VIP Executive Committee, which makes the decision about whether or not Prince Harry should have security. Here is the full interview. Firstly, I just wanted to start in kind of general terms. You obviously sat on RAVEC yourself for some time. You've got a lot of experience in counter-terrorism and policing. And I just wanted to ask you if you might be able to talk us through kind of general feel of RAVEC meetings. I think they meet roughly 3 times a year, is that right? And I wonder how much sway the royal household really has in these meetings, whether if they had a quiet word in somebody's ear about what kind of level of protection they wanted a member of the royal family to have, that would very much be adhered to, or whether there is pushback and it is a bit more equal in terms of the discussion and the decisions made.
Well, it's good that you phrased it like that, because my understanding is the terms of reference were rewritten to make it absolutely clear that each member of the committee had equal responsibility and therefore equal capability of pushing back. So
Okay.
effectively, all of us, if you consider the power, you've got the head of the royal household, you've got the commissioners delegate, the most powerful police officer in the country, and the head of counter-terrorism effectively in the room, and you've got the Director General of the Home Office, Homeland Security in the room. So you've got some very powerful people in the room. None of them are going to be pushed or swayed by the other person. The idea is that it is a partnership that comes to a mutually agreed decision. But at the end of the day, the final decision, the final vote, if you like, rests with the chair.
Do you think, I mean, it's something that Harry spoke about a lot in court, about how opaque the whole system was. He himself, I think, found it very difficult to find out who even sat on RAVEC in the first place. Do you think it's a good and fair system?
I don't think there's anything wrong with the system, but the system, it was necessarily opaque, because what you don't want is revelations of the actual operating methods or the way the threat assessment and risk assessment is done. I mean, that is absolute gold dust to an adversary who wants to plot against one of their principles. So you don't want anybody to know how many principles are protected, how they're protected in terms of methodology, how much it costs. All of these things are very useful to our adversaries.
Today, we have some absolutely major news that validates everything Prince Harry has been saying for years about his security concerns. And I mean everything. Former UK counter-terror chief Neil Basu, one of the most respected and experienced figures in British law enforcement, has spoken out. And his words are not only shocking, but deeply vindicating for Harry. Basu has confirmed that Prince Harry's threat level is very high, and that he should absolutely be on the protected list with full armed security. This isn't tabloid speculation. This isn't palace gossip. This is coming from someone who knows exactly what he's talking about, a man who spent decades protecting the nation from terrorist threats. So, grab your tea, settle in, and let's break this down thoroughly. Before we dive into what Neil Basu said, let's talk about who he is, because his credentials are absolutely crucial to understanding why this statement carries so much weight. Neil Basu served as the head of UK counter-terrorism policing. We're talking about one of the highest-ranking officers in British law enforcement, someone who was responsible for assessing and managing threats to national security, public figures, and the royal family itself. This is not someone with a political agenda. This is not a Sussex supporter trying to make headlines. This is a professional who has seen classified intelligence, who has worked directly with MI5 and MI6, and who understands threat assessment better than almost anyone in the country. When Neil Basu speaks about security risks, people listen, or at least they should. Now, here's what he revealed. Back in 2019, Prince Harry was ranked second only to the late Queen Elizabeth II in terms of risk level. Let that sink in for a moment. Second only to the Queen. That means even while Harry was still a working royal, before Megxit, before the Oprah interview, before the Netflix series, the intelligence services and counter-terror officials considered the threats against him to be extraordinarily serious. But here's the kicker, according to Basu. Those risks haven't decreased since Harry stepped back from royal duties. In fact, they've increased. And that makes perfect sense when you think about the trajectory of Harry and Meghan's public life over the past few years. After stepping back, Harry's public profile didn't shrink, it exploded globally. His outspokenness on issues like racism, mental health, press reform and social justice put him squarely in the crosshairs of some very dangerous ideologies and groups. When you challenge systemic racism, when you call out institutional failures, when you expose media corruption, you make enemies, powerful enemies. And unfortunately, some of those enemies aren't just keyboard warriors. They're people capable of real-world violence. Neil Basu's assessment isn't theoretical. It's based on actual intelligence about credible threats. And the fact that he's willing to speak publicly about this tells you just how serious he believes the situation has become. Now, let's connect this to Harry's ongoing legal fight, because this is where things get really frustrating. For those who haven't followed every twist and turn, here's the background. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties in 2020, the UK Home Office stripped Harry of his taxpayer-funded police protection. The decision was made by RAVEC, the Royal and VIP Executive Committee, a shadowy body that decides who gets protection and who doesn't. Harry wasn't asking for free protection. He offered to pay for it himself. He went to court, arguing that he should be allowed to privately fund his own police security when visiting the UK. He even offered to cover all costs, officers, logistics, everything. The Home Office refused. They said no, he couldn't even pay for the very security that experts like Neil Basu are now saying he desperately needs. And what happened next? The tabloids had a field day. They painted Harry as entitled, as someone demanding special treatment, as a prince throwing a tantrum because he couldn't have his way. Headlines screamed that he was being paranoid, that he was exaggerating the threats, that he wanted taxpayers to foot the bill for luxury security. None of that was true, but the damage was done in the court of public opinion. Critics mocked him relentlessly. Social media trolls called him a coward. Even some commentators who should have known better suggested that Harry was just trying to maintain his royal lifestyle without the royal responsibilities. But here's Neil Basu, one of the UK's top former counter-terror chiefs, confirming that Harry's danger level is very high and that he absolutely needs full armed protection. If that doesn't prove Harry was right all along, I genuinely don't know what does. This isn't about privilege. This isn't about wanting special treatment. This is about a father trying to protect his wife and children from credible, documented threats that intelligence professionals take extremely seriously. And let's be clear about something else. The UK government's position has been contradictory and, frankly, disturbing. They acknowledge that threats exist otherwise. Why would they have ever provided security in the first place? But they simultaneously claim that Harry doesn't need protection anymore, despite the fact that, by all expert accounts, the threats have actually gotten worse. It's a bureaucratic catch-22 that puts Harry's family in genuine danger, and it's completely indefensible now that someone like Neil Basu has spoken out. Let's talk about the actual threats Harry and Meghan face, because I think some people genuinely don't understand just how serious this is. We're not talking about angry tweets. We're not talking about nasty comments on Instagram. We're talking about organised hate groups, far-right extremists, and individuals who have made explicit threats of violence. Remember that Meghan, a biracial woman who married into the British royal family, became a lightning rod for racists and white supremacists. The abuse she received wasn't just cruel, it was coordinated, systematic, and in some cases came from individuals and groups that security services actively monitor for terrorist activity. Harry has spoken openly about the racist undertones in much of the media coverage Meghan received. He's talked about the parallels to what his mother faced, but with the added dimension of racial hatred. That hatred doesn't just stay online, it can and does spill into the real world. Neil Basu himself has acknowledged that far-right terrorism is one of the fastest-growing threats in the UK. These aren't abstract dangers. There have been plots, arrests and convictions of individuals who targeted public figures for their political views or their stance on racial justice. When Harry spoke out about Black Lives Matter, when Meghan gave powerful speeches about racial equality, when they both challenged the status quo, they painted targets on their backs in the eyes of extremists. And it's not just ideological threats. There's also the issue of obsessive individual stalkers who become fixated on public figures. Meghan has dealt with stalkers both in the UK and the US. These are people who show up at properties, who make threats, who exhibit concerning behaviour that law enforcement takes very seriously. Then there's the broader issue of Harry's military service. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan, where he was an active combat soldier and an Apache helicopter pilot. He's spoken openly about his role in military operations. That makes him a target for terrorist groups and individuals seeking revenge or trying to make a political statement. All of these factors compound. It's not just one type of threat, it's a convergence of multiple serious risk factors that any security professional would recognise as requiring the highest level of protection. The fact that Neil Basu is speaking out about this publicly tells you that he's genuinely concerned about what could happen if adequate security isn't provided. These aren't the words of someone covering his back or playing politics. These are the words of someone who has seen the intelligence and is alarmed by what he knows. We can't have this conversation without addressing the elephant in the room, Princess Diana. Harry has been very open about how his mother's death shaped his views on security and media intrusion. Diana died in a car crash while being pursued by paparazzi in Paris in 1997. The circumstances of her death have been debated endlessly, but what's undeniable is that inadequate security and aggressive media pursuit played a role in the tragedy. Harry was just 12 years old when he lost his mother. He's carried that trauma his entire life. And now, as a father himself, he's determined not to let history repeat itself. When Harry talks about security concerns, he's not being dramatic, he's being protective. He's a man who understands, in the most visceral way possible, what can happen when security fails and when the media becomes a dangerous force. People sometimes dismiss Harry's concerns as paranoia or as him playing the victim. But put yourself in his shoes for a moment. You lost your mother in circumstances involving security failures and media harassment. You're now married with children. You're receiving credible threats. Intelligence officials are telling you the danger is real. Wouldn't you do everything in your power to protect your family? Harry has said repeatedly that his biggest fear is history repeating itself, that his wife could face the same fate as his mother, that his children could grow up without a parent the way he did. That's not paranoia. That's trauma-informed protectiveness, and it's completely justified given what we now know from Neil Basu's revelations. The UK establishment needs to recognise that their handling of Harry's security isn't just a bureaucratic matter, it's a moral one. They have a responsibility, not just legally, but ethically, to ensure that someone at such high risk has adequate protection. So where do we go from here? Neil Basu's statement should be a turning point. This should be the moment when the UK government and RAVEC reassess their position on Harry's security. First, the Home Office needs to acknowledge that their current stance is untenable. You cannot have one of the country's top counter-terror experts saying someone is at very high risk, while simultaneously denying that person the ability to secure adequate protection. Second, if the government isn't willing to provide taxpayer-funded security, which, let's be honest, they're probably not, they should, at minimum, allow Harry to pay for his own police protection when he visits the UK. There is no logical reason to deny him this option. It costs the taxpayer nothing and ensures the safety of a high-risk individual. Third, there needs to be transparency about the decision-making process at RAVEC. This committee operates in secrecy, and while some level of confidentiality around security matters is understandable, the lack of accountability is deeply concerning. Harry has a right to understand the reasoning behind decisions that directly affect his family's safety. Finally, the media and the public need to shift their perspective on this issue. This isn't royal drama. This isn't about celebrities wanting special treatment. This is a serious security matter involving credible threats to people's lives. Neil Basu's intervention should be a wake-up call to everyone who's mocked or dismissed Harry's concerns. When someone with his credentials and experience speaks out, we need to listen. So, what do you think? Should the UK reinstate Harry's official protection, especially after this revelation from Neil Basu? Should they, at minimum, allow him to fund his own security? And what does it say about the system that it took a former counter-terror chief speaking out publicly for people to start taking this seriously? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a respectful, thoughtful conversation about this.